herzlich willkommen zur Hauptbühne zurück. Wir machen weiter mit der Proteinwende in Holland, wie Hersteller, Kunden und Handel davon profitieren. Und wir werden zwei Experten aus Holland heute hören. Zum einen Jeroen Willemsen, Innovationsmanager des Proteinshifts. Und zum anderen wird eine kurze Einleitung Dr. Jochem Wolthuis vom Agrofood Deutschland geben und natürlich erzählen, was sie gemacht haben. So also a warm welcome to Mr. Jeroen Willemsen. He will speak in English and the short introduction will be made by Jochem. So I would like you to post your questions via the chat function. So bitte alle die Fragen über den Chat posten. Wir werden dann nach den Statements eine kurze Q&A-Session machen. Oh, okay, dann übergebe ich das Wort an Jochem und Jeroen.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank für die Einladung und auch die Gelegenheit, uns hier vorstellen zu dürfen. Ist jetzt meine Präsentation sichtbar? Sehr gut. Gut, wir wollen etwas erzählen über die Proteinwende in Holland, wie wir vor allem die Hersteller, Kunden und Handel Ich bin extra dafür angestellt worden, von den Nachbarprovinzen auch in diesem Bereich zu wachsen mit deutschen Partnern. Meine Herkunft ist deutsche Mutter, holländischer Vater, also zwei Seelen in einer Brust. Und an dieser Stelle absolut die Einladung, dass ich für alle Fragen, die aus Deutschland kommen, wünsche, bin ich der richtige Ansprechpartner. Das ist meine Aufgabe. Und ich konzentriere mich auch auf wirklich die Hauptfelder, alternative Proteinquellen, die Kreislauflandwirtschaft, was alles damit zu tun hat, gesunde Ernährung und natürlich die Technologie und unter anderem des Dachs der Wirtschaftsförderungsgesellschaft Oost NL. Um ganz kurz zu skizzieren, Provinzen, Nachbarlandprovinzen, wo unter anderem auch jetzt Jeroen Willemsen vor Ort ist, in der Foodvalley, und das ist natürlich bekannt auch unter anderem für unsere Agraruniversität in Wageningen, aber auch natürlich unser Hochleistungssportzentrum Papendal in Nimwegen, der Han baut. Alles zusammen, und das ergibt für mich die Möglichkeit, Themen zu besprechen, alles zum Thema Personalized Food, neue Eiquellen, alles in Zusammenarbeit mit auch Wageningen, aber auch Papendal, Hochleistungssportzentrum, Food Design und auch das neu zu errichten World Food Center in Ede. Ganz kurz vorweg, in diesem Jahr haben wir in Holland die nationale Eiweißstrategie abgesegnet. 2. September hat unsere Ministerin das auch präsentiert. Und das ist für uns die Basis auch in die Zukunft mit diesem Dokument weiterzuarbeiten. Und einer, der ich persönlich habe einbringen dürfen, ist letztendlich die Zusammenarbeit mit Deutschland. Wo liegen unser Mehrwert? Wo können wir zu diesem Thema mehr erreichen durch Zusammenarbeit? Und das ist von der riesigen grünen Woche Anfang des Jahres, was wir leider nicht haben werden im kommenden Jahr. Aber da durfte ich 9 Startups mitnehmen, viel im Bereich der neuen Proteinquellen, viel Aufmerksamkeit erregt, schmecken und entdecken, eine ganze Plattform. Und das hat uns letztendlich auch sehr erfreulicherweise zu einer schönen Beurteilung, guter Beurteilung gebracht. Vegetarischer Kebab der Firma Evolution Meats und mit der Überschrift Vegansinn auf der grünen Woche. Waren nicht viele Unternehmen in diesem Bereich tätig bislang, aber mit vegetarischem Kebab haben wir da viele Aufmerksamkeit erregt in Deutschland. Und deswegen auch dieses Bild. Ich bin wirklich davon überzeugt, dass wir durch Zusammenarbeit mehr erreichen und einfach unsere Fäden zusammenführen müssen, damit wir das gemeinsam stricken. Das ist die kurze Einleitung meinerseits. Ich freue mich sehr auf Jeroen Willemsen, der Gründer der holländischen Proteincluster. Aber da wird er seinen Vortrag zu halten. Schon mal an dieser Stelle herzlichen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Jeroen.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Jochem, for the kind introduction. So in the next 12 minutes, I will share with you some insights, some experiences towards hopefully jointly strengthen the speed of the so-called protein shift. So this is me here, and just like everybody, my body consists of about 60% water, but the remaining part, 40%, half of that remaining part is proteins. And proteins, as you may know, are very important building blocks for our body. And we need it every day, our proteins, and for a healthy and long life. And as you may know, we get our proteins from animal sources like meat or fish or dairy, or plant-based sources like legumes or nuts or seeds. And the thing is that with respect to our protein intake, over the past, let's say, 60, 70 years, we have gone a little bit out of balance. I have illustrated that here in this visualization. Where I want to state in 1972 I was born, and basically ever since that period we have overconsumed our proteins. We have built this meat mountain, as I call it, over the past 40, 50, 60 years. We've also highly increased our consumption of dairy and dairy protein sources to a fact where we are now, in fact. So we are standing on top of that meat mountain, and where we once thought that overconsumption or much consumption of meat was very healthy and a sign of luxury and welfare, we can now see a little bit further, and we also see that the contrast, in fact, is true. It is not so healthy, not so sustainable, the way we are currently over-consuming meat and dairy. But then stepping off that meat mountain is more easily said than done. There are more and more people who see that we can live and we can consume much more healthy, much more sustainable, but doing so really in our daily habits and feed pattern is much more difficult. But still, this is my personal quest. I want to restore in one generation what has gone out of balance in the past 2 generations. I want to restore the protein balance. And in that restored protein balance, there is still room for dairy, for meat, but more so, again, for plant protein sources. But why is that so difficult to jump off that meat mountain and to reduce our meat consumption? Well, I think this picture, at least for me, it says it all. The juiciness, the tenderness, the structure, the bite of meat, the smell when you put it on your barbecue. I think many of us can recognize the almost instinctive joy that it brings also in our mind and to our body. So, and that's also one of the challenges that we have. And in the area of new meat and meat-like products, this is an example that you may recognize. This was a start of Beyond Meat in the USA, and they at the launch at the stock market, they had immediately an immense value of $1 billion. And it shows, in fact, that something is happening in this whole era of proteins. And well, let me share with you some insights of what I think is happening. I think that at this moment, a serious business, which is this protein shift or restoring that protein balance, is now really turning into serious business. And I think that is a very crucial boundary condition also for accelerating this protein shift or Protein-Wende. And let me show you some examples to back that up. Here you again see that same picture that I showed earlier. In fact, this is not animal meat, this is plant meat. So it is 100% plant-based. It was a product that I personally launched from my company, Oja, about 10 years back. A few years later, only a few years later, in 2015, the company was acquired by a very large multinational called Kerry Ingredients. And at that time, you see here in 2018, it was stated that Kerry bets big on plant-based trend. But nowadays, we see almost every month, we see an acquisition, a merger of a large company also taking over smaller companies who are active in the area of plant-based proteins. So this is a sign how a serious business is turning into serious business. In fact, this was one of my first clients. This man is called Jaap Korteweg, and he calls himself the first vegetarian butcher, der erste vegetarische Metzger in the world. And at the time, he called me about 10 years back, and he said, Jeroen, I want to become the largest butcher in the world. But not with meat, but with plant meat. I said, okay, that's quite an ambition. What do you need? He said, well, I need revolutionary products that really mimic the smell, the taste, the texture of meat, because that's what instinctively still binds or withholds many people to restore their protein balance. So I sold him at the time my vegetable chicken pieces, and he marketed those under the name of the vegetarian butcher. And immediately from the start, it was a big hit. And in fact, it led also 1.5 years ago to the fact that Unilever, and most of you will know Unilever as a very large company in food, actually also acquired the vegetarian butcher. So again, here we have a sign how a serious business is turning into serious business, because now all of a sudden there is a massive attention and also reach to a whole new group of consumers. Only yesterday I visited the Burger King, which I do not regularly do, but I did for this time because last week a plant-based Whopper was introduced, only because of Unilever in cooperation with the vegetarian butcher made that possible. And now here's another example. And this guy, I really admire him. This is Timo Recker, a German guy who I met also 10 years ago. At that time, he had this dream. He was the son of parents who had a company called Der Schnitzelmacher. If I had to believe him, the largest schnitzel producer, or at least one of the largest schnitzel producers in Germany. And Timo said to his parents, I'm going to do it different. I want to start a company producing plant-based schnitzels. And he called his company Like Meat. And he came to me, to the Netherlands, and asked if I could provide him these plant-based schnitzels. And in fact, it was quite successful. And it was so successful, actually, that he also started to do his own production. And only earlier this year, his company, Like Meat, was sold and is now part of a large platform of other brands called Live Kindly. And what I really admire also in this guy is that when he sold his company, he took his stuff and he is now in Singapore. And he is trying also to start up a new plant protein business in Singapore. So this is really an entrepreneurial guy. And it also shows, and that's also what I want to say here, how Germany and the Netherlands really interact and also cooperate and perhaps lead the way also for some other brands and companies. And that it is turning into a serious business is visualized in this graph. It shows an estimate in $1 million what the market size is of so-called meat successors or meat analogs. And these numbers are from 2018. And I know for a fact that now in 2020s and accelerated even by everything that's happening in terms of COVID, this market is really now exploding. So you can almost double already the numbers that you see here. Almost, not quite, but almost. So it really shows that it is really, really exploding and taking off now. So again, it is clear for me, and I hope also for you, that this is the era in which a serious business is turning into a serious business. And this also shows that we are really moving on in the so-called protein transition. This is a theoretical visualization of transition processes. It shows how we start with first movers and then slowly move to critical mass and institutionalization. And in fact, where we are right now with the Protein-Wende, with the protein shift, is here. We are at this famous hockey stick where all the large companies and the corporates step in and also take their chance, basically, to profit from plant proteins. And with that also comes a new form of the ecosystem surrounding it. And this is how we also in the Netherlands approach it. What we are doing now is we're setting up platforms of not just the startups and the new companies, but also connecting them with these corporate companies like Unilever, like DSM, like Upfield, like other big companies who are operating worldwide. And that's also a part of the new ecosystem that is now at this moment being formed here in the Netherlands. And we also try to help all these companies who would like to profit from plant proteins with, for example, services in which we show maps here for the Netherlands, but we're thinking about expanding it also to Germany, where you can go to for upscaling your production. So if you want to produce a plant-based alternative for meat or fish and dairy, these are the hotspots where you can come to. These are the companies you can call who can do production for you. This is also one of the services that we offer and we think is very necessary at this moment. And fortunately, I see that also in Germany, we see these kinds of platforms being formed. For example, the Balpro initiative in Germany. So this also shows that not just in the Netherlands, but in many other Western European countries, you see that this next phase of the protein shift is really taking place. Meaning that people, companies, small and big, really find each other and really excite each other and inspire each other to speed up things. This is one of my final slides because again here I want to show how we can cooperate together, Germany and the Netherlands. This picture was taken last year at an event called the Foodvalley Summit, which will also be taking place this year on October 13. It will be an online event. But anyways, I met there last year my friend at this moment, Nicolas Hartmann, founder of a German startup called Fly Foods. And they're really flying. They're really taking off now. And it also shows that this whole Protein-Wende is not just about meat or meat alternatives. It is really about changing the protein game in all its aspects. And I really enjoy being part of that. And I want to end also with my call for action also to you. And I try to frame it in German, and I'll try to read it for you. Die Zukunft, meine Damen und Herren, kann nur vorhergesagt werden, indem wir sie selbst gestalten. So I really call out to you also, please also take your chance, and it would be great if together we can really shape the future of protein. And having said that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Perhaps Jochem, you can take over again and see if there are any questions from the audience about my presentations, about how we can further team up. Thank you so much. I will now stop sharing.
I think you have shown that if you want, you can reach a lot. And the first question from Norbert Reichel is, where do you see the difference between Dutch and German food companies and the market of protein alternatives? How is the stage of these markets? Are there any difference on the retail scene or on the food supplier scene? What do you see as the main difference?
Yeah, my observation is that at least in the Netherlands, I really now see that these multinational corporates are really stepping in. And I do get signals also from Germany that that's happening, but I'm not sure if it's already at the same speed as I now experience in the Netherlands. I have seen at Rügenwalder Mühle and some other companies obviously also stepping into this whole topic of plant proteins. But I have the feeling, but again, it is a feeling that in the broader sense, so also companies like Danone or Friesland Campina or other companies also active in the dairy, for example, are now also really stepping in. And I'm wondering, and perhaps Norbert or any of the other attendees can also share some examples where perhaps that may already be happening in Germany as well. But that's my feeling. I really see that a connection is now being sought between these corporates and these smaller companies, perhaps to somewhat of a more intense focus in the Netherlands compared to Germany.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Unilever has just entered the market as a vegetarian butcher and also in Germany. So I think it's a first start if a big corporation like them will start with this kind of business. So maybe you are a little ahead, but Germany, I'm sure, will follow in this general trend. A next question from Thomas Herzlieb. Do you see the protein shift only in plant-based products or also in laboratory meat? What is your perspective on that?
Question, Thomas. It's a question that is of course very relevant, especially at this moment where there's quite a lot of attention for cell-based companies or cellular agriculture, as it's also called. It is my belief that there is no such thing as one solution or one product that really serves the needs of all consumers. For everybody, that will be different. I'm quite sure that if the cellular agriculture will manage to scale up its production and to be price competitive, that for sure there will be people, consumer groups who will also be very helped in restoring their protein balance. On the other hand, I do see that there's still some work to do. Especially for in Europe perspective, there's also quite some legal boundaries that still exist. So at this moment, I also really trust on the progress that's made in the plant-based area. But I really encourage also the research that is being done in the cell ag scope. And I myself, perhaps just as you yourself, just as eager to give it a try. And again, there's no such thing as one product or one solution that fits all.
Yeah, thank you very much. So related to this, a question from Kai Hempel. He wants to know how you place the insect protein trend in this area.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one as well. Thank you, Kai, for your question, because so we have plants, we have cell ag, and we also have insects. And from a sustainability point of view, insects are very, very useful because they basically eat what we or even some animals do not want to eat and transform it into valuable protein. On the other hand, there is something which I call neophobia. So it is fear of the new. Basically, and in recent years already, there have been quite some introductions of insect-based burgers and other products. And even though the taste was quite okay, there's something in our Western European minds that makes that we are quite hesitant. Perhaps we can try it once, but it's very difficult to really include it in our daily routines. So even though insects are a sustainable solution, I think there's still a long way to go before it's really accepted. And even when the insects are not visible as such, or parts of the insect, so processed in a burger, still, of course, we have to declare the ingredients. So, and of course, there are some examples where insect ingredients are already used in cookies or in other examples. But here it may become very explicit, not physically visible, but explicit also on the declaration of ingredients. And then our minds are playing with our feeling, with our emotion. So I think we have a long way to go before insects are perceived and are accepted just as they are in other parts of the world. But we can of course continue our research in how to grow these insects and how to process them. And if it's not for us, then being it for perhaps other parts of the world, and we cannot just export the ingredients, but we can also export the technology for growing the insects, feeding them, and perhaps processing them.
Okay, yeah, interesting answer. So maybe the next question is related to this, to bring forward a protein shift. Should we stronger go on the consumer side to sensibilize them in terms of protein consumption, or is it better to focus on product innovation in this area?
Yeah, well, for me, this is a very relevant question, because it is my understanding and my belief that if you look at the past 10 years, a lot of attention has gone, and also funding has gone to new products, and it was and it still is necessary. But we are at this turning point in the protein shift, where it is not just about enlarging the portfolio of products that people can buy, but it's really also about awareness and making it more easy. So, and making the healthy and sustainable protein choice more easy is on the one hand making sure that products are available and are recognizable and of course good tasting and affordable. But on the other side, it's also about the perception and the belief that in fact we need to change our food habits, not just for sustainability purposes, but in many cases also for health purposes. And in that respect, I do think that also governments should invest much more also in that part. So more the informational and perhaps some more emotional part as well, really creating and stimulating that awareness. So that is my personal belief.
Okay, thank you, Jeroen. And concerning the governmental side in both countries, the Netherlands and Germany, what could be the impact of institutions, governmental areas to promote this protein shift first?
Yeah, well, that's also interesting, because as some of you may know, and if not, you will know it in a minute. At a European level, there is now a protein strategy also being developed. And in fact, the example that Jochem showed of this Dutch protein strategy also comes from a question from Central Europe, asking different countries, what can you do to make Europe less dependent on the import of plant proteins and facilitate and accelerate this protein shift? So on the one hand, what governments can do is, of course, they can also stimulate the use of locally produced, let's say, European produced ingredients. Not in the last, also to start also with stimulating also local primary production of plant protein crops, for example. But that's only a part of the solution, because on the other hand, where it comes to consumer involvement, information, and creating awareness, that is, of course, the most important public task that governments have. And I sense, at least in the Netherlands, still some hesitation on really addressing that to the broader consumer audience. And it is also, it is a very sensitive topic about restoring that protein balance, perhaps eating a little bit less meat, a little bit less dairy, and again, some more plants. I do know that it's very sensitive, but it is very urgent. And at this moment, we are really at this turning point, also accelerated by everything what's happening around COVID-19. People are now really starting to think, is this the best way that I can live? Is it the most sustainable, the most healthy way? So this, in fact, is the era of protein change, and I really hope that governments will also take their responsibility there.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Maybe the last question in the official panel. How do you see prospectively the collaboration between the two countries, the Netherlands and Germany? Where should they really focus their collaboration? Are there any areas where one country can learn from the other, and vice versa? How do you see this in a greater entity?
Yeah, well, two answers to that. First of all, I think that both in the Netherlands and in Germany, we have these great technological hotspots. Also, really doing the best research related to protein shift, from new texturization methods, also to creating more to behavioral change, for example. So there is great value of exchanging that knowledge, and fortunately, there are already some examples, but I really think that we should intensify that, because the ecosystem that is needed for these protein shifts is not boundary set. So it doesn't stop at the boundary of the Netherlands or at Germany. So we really need to have this cross-border ecosystem created around it. And the second element is also about competitiveness. I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I really also see the benefits of competitiveness. And so let's keep each other sharp, also with good examples. For example, this Nicholas introducing a plant-based milk that really inspired, I know for a fact, also some Dutch entrepreneurs who said, okay, we have to speed up, because now we see this product being launched in Germany, and it looks really great. So I really also think that from an inspirational aspect, we can keep each other sharp and well, together sharing that bigger goal that we have, restoring the protein balance.
Okay, I think that's a fantastic final closing, to have more entrepreneurial spirit in this whole protein shift between the two countries, and I think this can help. Competition always helps, and it brings unusual forces together, and I think it's a very good motto. So I would like to close now the discussion. Thank you very much, Jeroen, for your presentation, and Jochem for the introduction. I would like you both to enter our cafe, where you also could meet Kai Hempel from Made by Made. He is specialized on insect food, and he probably would like to introduce his idea to you. So if you have time, please go to the cafe where you meet other participants, and you can have a personal chat. So thank you very much for your contributions, and have good luck for the further protein shift in the Netherlands.